Welcome to Her Wealth Unscripted. We're your hosts, Susan Jones
and Sara Gelsheimer. We believe financial decisions are most powerful when they're made with intention and grounded in what matters most to you.
This is a space for real conversations about money, life, and the moments that change everything.
Because it's more than numbers, it's the life they make possible.
I've really been looking forward to having this conversation with you, Sara. And when we first started talking about having an episode of our podcast about philanthropy, I have to admit that my mind went straight to the tax planning and the financial planning around making charitable gifts, which is something that we do really regularly with clients. But that really is such a, in some cases, I don't want to say a small piece, but really the secondary piece of making charitable gifts and just philanthropy in general. And it really starts with more of kind of a donative intent, which can be made through gifting, but also in so many other ways through, time and by sharing gifts and things like that. And so when I thought, who would be better to talk about this with, you're the one that really comes to mind because you have done so much with not only gifting, but also just philanthropy in general and have such a service-oriented nature about you. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation.
Well, thank you. I always look forward to an opportunity to talk about gifting or sharing, giving back in some way.
So, Sara, maybe do you mind telling a little bit our audience about some of your mission trips and just kind of your views on philanthropy and what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, from high school on, those were some of my most memorable times. So I think it was every summer in high school, our high school would take a trip somewhere in the country to do service work. And it was always a great time to obviously give back to the community. We did lots of different projects, whether we served in soup kitchens, we cleaned up schools and did lots of things like that. So kind of menial tasks at time, but it was always so fun to get to know other people in the country who really need help, and B, you start to bond with your peers in a whole other way. So did that every year of high school. So I guess you could say like caught the bug of giving back in that way. So then in college, this is going to date me a little bit, but it's when Hurricane Katrina happened. So for 2 years straight, 2 spring breaks, a group of us from college went and cleaned out homes that had been destroyed. It was, I was actually just telling my kids about it recently, that I can still smell the smells at times. Wow. But again, I mean, just leaving those trips with such gratitude for what I do have, and really just giving back to others and how meaningful that is. So that I was in college, and then after college, I wanted to have the mission trip of all mission trips, and that was to go to Africa. So I got the opportunity actually two different times to go to Uganda. Again, with the whole purpose of giving back, but in both times I came back changed. And I've told lots of people the story, but I was so worried about going over there because it's such devastation, poverty. And they were truly the happiest people I have ever met. Yeah. So you think, what are we doing wrong over here? So in all those cases, I truly felt like I was getting more back than what I was giving. And so I've really tried to instill that thought in any form of philanthropy, whether that is giving of time, talent, or treasure, and making it as big of an impact as possible.
And Sara, and I'm just projecting here, and I don't know what your answer is going to be, but when I think about even some of the volunteering and things that I've done earlier in high school and even grade school, a lot of it was because there was an adult organized, adventure, and then my friends were going and it was fun. But as I've kind of progressed through life, it really has become more something that is meaningful to me and something that, I wanted to do. And I have not done nearly the type of philanthropy that you have. But is that something you would say for you too?
Oh, absolutely. Well, and the other thing, and I should have said this earlier, you don't have to travel to Uganda, Africa to make a difference. There are so many opportunities just in your local communities to do something, to give back. And it is, it did go from doing the activities because my friends were doing them, and then realizing okay, this is actually really amazing, and I really enjoyed it. But as I've gotten older now, it's now with kids too.
Yeah.
It is more of that micro giving back.
Yeah.
So finding little ways to give back that don't involve traveling halfway across the world.
And Sarah, one of the things that we really try to do and do with our clients is to align their financial life and their wealth with their non-financial goals. And philanthropy is one of, I think, the most powerful ways that we can do that. And so maybe just explain a little bit. So if when you're helping a client, really kind of put together their philanthropy vision and how that is going to be structured from more of like a values and a goals orientation, how you go about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the most fun topics to chat with clients about because it's kind of living vicariously through them. I love having the conversations of what is meaningful to you, what brings you joy, what makes you sad. Like sometimes what makes you sad is something that can direct your funds toward a specific organization that helps with something that, really tugs at your heartstrings. So digging deep on the values can help you align, okay, now that we know what's really important to you, how can we find charities that match up with that? And so it's really fun. And I would say too, I've really enjoyed working with families who are very philanthropic. Yeah. And they are passing that along to their kids. So hosting family meetings where it's not only talking about the mom and dad's charitable intent, but also, how they can get their kids involved in that and really making sure they're listening to their kids and hearing what their kids are interested in doing and supporting them on that journey as well.
Yeah, that's great. And, I think some of my very favorite clients are the ones that are generous in many ways. And so whether it's, to charities and philanthropy and to their children and other family members. And so being able to help someone who does have that generous spirit really make sure that they're doing it in the way that is most aligned with them, I think is really rewarding. Yeah. And hopefully helpful to them as well.
For sure. Yeah. And, I think a lot of it goes to, there are some clients that really want to give some dollars to a lot of different charities, which is great. And then you have clients who really want to make sure their dollars have the biggest impact. So sometimes they're wanting to put more of their dollars towards one charity and oftentimes a small charity so that those dollars really can be very impactful for that specific charity. So that, no two donors are the same, which keeps things interesting.
Right. Exactly. And, obviously when we're working with clients on that, there is a big piece of it that is making sure that they get the most benefit from it financially as well. And so, and even as you're talking about, getting the family involved, one of my favorite ways to do that is by using a donor advised fund. And I think, there was a period several years ago that I actually told clients that I swear I am not affiliated in any way with the donor advised fund industry. It's just that they can be such a flexible option for a number of reasons. And so as one of the best benefits of it is the tax benefit of being able to make one gift to the donor advised fund. You receive your income tax deduction right when that gift is made. And then although you're technically not able to tell the donor advised fund where to give it, for all practical purposes, you retain the right to direct where those funds go later on. And so for someone who likes to either spread out their charitable giving to, a lot of organizations, it can help get that tax benefit right away and also help that they don't have to keep track of all those different receipts. They get the one and then they don't have to worry about everything else.
Huge benefit.
Huge benefit. Yep. And also it's an easy way, especially if you're making gift of appreciated stock, because you can make the gift, you could get the tax benefit at the fair market value. You don't have to sell the stock, but then you don't also have to recognize the gain, which is a huge benefit. And again, rather than having to worry about doing all those little stock transfers, which we obviously would help our clients with, but even so, it can become burdensome, especially for those small charities that maybe aren't set up to do that. They just make one gift to the donor advised fund and then don't have to worry about it. And one of my other things that I think oftentimes goes not talked about enough is that you can actually name other people to make gifts using your donor advised fund. And you can call your donor advised fund almost anything you want to. And so I've often had clients that are like, oh, if only there was a way that was, not a lot of administration and but that we could still have our family involved. And I don't think I want a foundation. And setting up a donor advised fund and calling it your family foundation, and then either directly or indirectly giving your children the ability to direct a certain percentage every year, I think is just a really great way to do that. And you're nodding your
I
head.
know.
And so
I was like, I get so excited. I love donor advised funds. Be nice if we got a kickback because
Right.
you're doing great. I've recommended them so many times.
so many times.
But the family I was referring to, one of the families that I would have a family meeting with every year, that's exactly what they did. They had a very large donor advised fund. They actually got a company match. And so when they, right before they retired, they made a really large contribution. They got a company match. And so they had this huge pot that they were able to then put into their donor advised fund. They were able to take that deduction during a high income year prior to when they were retiring, where their income was going to be reduced. So this big pot of money has been used for donations really since retirement. And since it's such a large amount of money, they've let their kids each year get to contribute a certain amount every year. And I love it because they come together in their family meeting and they have the requirement that the kids have to do their research. They have to bring to the meeting a presentation as to why they think that this particular charity deserves the funds. And then mom and dad, I've never seen them say no to that, but, essentially get the buy-in, and then that's how they allocate the funds. So it is it's like a win-win-win. The donor advised fund can be hugely beneficial, and I love that it can incorporate the family into the giving.
Yeah, I love that. And what a great way just to get the kids working together and just to build build philanthropy into kind of their overall family mission. That's wonderful. That really is great. And I think a lot of people don't realize that you can invest a donor advised fund. And so if you have a large donor advised fund, you can invest it in equities or bonds or whatever you want combination. And that can grow tax-free, and then it can go out to the charities eventually tax-free as well.
Yeah.
So.
And in your example earlier, you can list the kids to actually be the ones who get to dictate those grants at death if you decide you want them to make those decisions at your death versus making the decisions now on the in charity. So really is a great opportunity for that to grow. And then it can be the kids' philanthropy bucket, for them down the road.
Yeah, later on. Another way that people can make gifts is using their qualified plan, so their IRA. And I think this is something, I used to be a little bit less, I don't know. I thought it was a great idea, but until this past summer when the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the OBBBA, was passed, I thought for a lot of taxpayers, it was a little bit of a break even. And so the way it works is that you can gift up to, I think it's $107,000 right now. It was $100,000 for years and years. And then just recently it was became indexed for inflation. And so it's a little over $100,000. But the way it works is that you can give that amount directly from your IRA as long as you're age 70 and a half. And so even if that is younger than your RMD age, you can actually still go ahead and do that as long as you're 70 and a half. And that and a half is important. So just, I did have a client one time who just couldn't wait until that day. And so we all had it calendared that was the day he could start giving from his IRA. But you can make a gift directly to charity. And although you don't get a tax deduction for it, it does get, it's not included in your income. So, prior to the OBBBA was a little bit of a wash for a lot of taxpayers because although you didn't have the deduction, you also didn't have the income. Whereas if you took the income, then you could theoretically get a deduction, and they would oftentimes, kind of wipe each other out in a way that really wasn't too impactful. But starting in 2026, so this year, because of that tax legislation, there's now a 0.5% AGI limitation on charitable gifts. So when you make a gift to charity, the only piece that's deductible is the amount that is over that 0.5% of your AGI. So if you have a large income year, that obviously is a much larger number. And so now making gifts directly from your IRA can be really helpful. There's also, again, because of that law that was passed this past summer, overall limitation on itemized deduction. So if you're in the 37% tax bracket, the highest marginal rate that you can get a benefit from is 35%. So just overall, there's these new limitations on itemized deductions, which of course impact charitable giving. So I'm now a bigger believer than ever in the ability to go ahead and, especially you have a large IRA, you have a large RMD. A lot of our clients, they really don't want or need that RMD for their living expenses. And so it can be a great way to fulfill your charitable giving intention.
Yeah, I would say the vast majority of my clients who are of required minimum distribution age, so that's 73 to 75, depending on when you were born, the vast majority use qualified charitable distributions to offset that RMD, which is, it's such a great benefit. And even more so now that there are some more limitations with the standard deduction, with the OBBBA.
Yeah.
And so what I've seen a lot of clients do, let's say that they retired at age 65. And so what we'll do is we'll figure out, okay, if their annual giving is $20,000 a year, we'll determine, okay, if you retire at 65 and your income's going to be lower, let's do a big donation to a donor advised fund and get you all the way to age 70 and a half, or maybe even 73 if you want to wait till you start your RMDs, and really fund that donor advised fund for that number of years, and then deplete the donor advised fund so that at 70 and a half or 73, that's when you start making those gifts from your IRA. So there's a lot of cool tax planning with both vehicles, depending on when you retire and your income of each year.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of the things for a traditional IRA, one of the reasons that our clients don't love them is because it comes out as ordinary income. So from a tax impact, that's kind of the worst, right? So we like our qualified dividends and our long-term capital gains, and then ordinary income is sort of the the one that you want to put last.
Yes.
And that is also true of the after death. And so for inheriting an asset, because their taxable investment portfolio is going to receive a step up in basis at death, their family members are likely going to inherit that without any capital gains, as opposed to an IRA, which continues to be ordinary income for everyone who inherits it later on. And so for a lot of my clients, not only do we plan to do those charitable distributions during life, but then we actually name a charity as the beneficiary of the IRA. And I think also a lot of people don't understand is that you can divide up your IRA into as many different IRAs as you want to. And as far as the IRS is concerned, it gets aggregated, so it's still just one IRA. But in terms of being able to name charitable beneficiaries versus trusts versus family members, you can do that in a way that you can make sure that the charity gets the amount that you want them to. So you can really kind of go ahead and say, this is the pot of money that I would like to go to charity, start making those qualified charitable distributions during life, and then actually name the charity as the beneficiary at death.
That's a great point. Well, and the Secure Act, speaking of additional legislation, made inheriting retirement assets or IRA, pre-tax assets, even more burdensome. I mean, an inheritance is still not the worst thing, but you now have to take it out over 10 years and pay tax on it. So this is even more reason to consider, giving all or a portion of your IRA to charity at death.
Yeah, agreed. So let's back up a little bit. So you mentioned earlier your family that has the family meeting that you facilitate, and that really is part of their sort of, family mission is to make charitable gifts, which is really impressive. And I think kind of inspirational, especially as a parent. We're both parents. You have 3 children. I have 4 children. And I'm sure that family didn't start with that, right? I'm sure that they started when their kids were much smaller, doing smaller acts of service and gifting, and then kind of worked their way up to that level of synchronized gifting, which is really impressive. So maybe tell a little bit about what you've seen with clients, or maybe in your own life, especially with you being so philanthropic. How have you started to create that with your own family?
So I read a book by Carol Weissman. She's an author in St. Louis, actually. She wrote a book called Raising Charitable Children. And I read it several years ago and was really inspired by it. Highly recommend. It's a really short book, but really actionable in terms of how to raise kids with a charitable mindset. So I read it. In fact, I read it, I think, before I even had children. So, but I've always had this, philanthropic mindset, philanthropic heart. And so when I had kids, I was like, I dreamt of all the things, all the ways I was going to instill these good values in my kids. And there are various things that I've tried over the years that have worked really well, and others that have not. But I will say there are lots of moments where, so we did spend, save, and give jars. So that's, the typical jars where you divvy up your money. So when we were making the jars, my kids were like, give? Like, what do you mean give? And so I was explaining that we give a portion of our money to people who need it more than we do. And more than one of them said, oh, I don't want to waste my money. I was like, oh, it's like a dagger to the heart. It's like, where have I gone wrong? So they had, I was like, man, that's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow to hear them say. But then I will say that they surprise you, and they really do observe the actions, your actions, right? So just the other day, my kids created this, what did they call it? Christmas pop-up or whatever in our basement. So my husband and I had cleaned up all of our Christmas decorations. They took them all back out and set them up in our basement, and we're charging people $3 to come through it. It was adorable. And that was their way of collecting money. They asked if we could have random people at our house. I was like, no. So we're going to FaceTime family, and they're going to Venmo us $3. Yeah. So long story short, they had done this for, a couple hours that night and had made, I don't know, they maybe had like $15 each, give or take. It's a pretty good sum of money for, 8, 5, and 4-year-old. So one of our church friends had come over to collect a tub of baby clothes that we were giving away because she was volunteering for an organization, and we are done having children. So I was like, take these clothes. So she was telling us about this woman who is from Africa and is pregnant here in the United States and has nothing. So they were taking these baby clothes out, and my son was standing there saying, he goes, here, take this $15 that I just made tonight and give this to her because she needs it more than I do. And I was like, I've never been more proud in my life. So I share the story to say it's not always the things that we had set up, when I talk about, let's go spend some money and buy hats and gloves for the homeless shelter, the local homeless shelter. There's some grumblings sometimes, but you never know when they choose to do it, it's much more meaningful than when I'm saying, here's what you should do.
Yeah. Yeah, and that really is, it's that mindset that just you thought of that immediately, that they need it more than him. And that's great.
It was a proud moment.
Yeah, very proud. And, my kids are older than yours because I'm older than you, obviously. And it's been interesting to me. So a lot earlier in when the kids were smaller, I was on the board of the Magic House in St. Louis, Missouri, which is one of my all-time favorite charities. And I have to say, it was the first board that I ever served on, and I called it the big board. I had served on like committees of some different boards, but it was the first time I was on, the board. And really, I would say in that experience, learned that, for me at least, the heart of service is finding an organization that you really believe in and that you feel good about. So became kind of involved in the Magic House, always went to, all the events, and the Magic House was great about reaching out and making sure that we were invited to events and that we attended. And my kids really took that seriously. I mean, it was interesting, like in their minds, like the Magic House was, kind of part of our family. And as they progressed, it's been interesting to me to see how they really relate as part of like philanthropy, being involved with a charitable organization. And so not too long ago, my daughters, who ride horses, they're equestrians, and they started a charity with a couple of other of their fellow equestrians to help horses that were no longer able to be, show horses, and that needed they were ill and they needed some help. And so I don't know if I've told you this yet, but Sorelle might have sponsored, which, it's funny. So they came to me and they said, we're starting this organization and they said, would Sorelle be a sponsor? And I thought that was interesting because clearly they have picked up on some of the things that I've done. That's partly how you get, your part of your donations is by offering sponsorships. And so I thought I'm not sure if I should be proud or what of that.
You should be proud. You should definitely be proud.
But it really is. I think you're so right that kids pay attention to what we're doing and, emulate it. And part of their high school curriculum now also includes a lot of charitable hours. And so I'm hoping it's one of those things that as they're doing it, I found that they've started doing it more. So they started off doing it to meet their high school requirements, but I've seen them do a little bit more than they need to. So I'm hoping that that's something we can continue to encourage.
I do think, for those who have given, really, whether it is time, talent, or treasure, they say that you get so much more back as
Yeah.
a giver than the receiver,
Yeah.
but I think it's so true. And that's why when
Yes.
you do it, you're like, okay, I want more of that.
Yeah.
So that's great that they're
Yeah.
going above and beyond already.
They are. They are. So Sarah, again, just kind of focusing on Sorelle and how we help clients. What is something that if there's someone who's listening right now that thinks, I would really like to build charity more into my life, or probably, for a lot of us, it's something maybe we did more when we were younger, then life got busy with work and children. What's a way that you think that someone can kind of start working that into their everyday life, be it their financial plan or even just kind of their everyday routine?
Well, I think your earlier comment about finding a charity that really speaks to you, that you're really
Mhm.
passionate about, whether that is just starting to volunteer a few hours a week. I've found a lot of clients try to instill that or start that before retirement, which is kind of a nice way to ease into
Yeah.
having something
Yeah.
to do, some purpose in life in retirement, because that's often something that they struggle with once they enter retirement. So starting the volunteer hours with somewhere that you're feeling passionate about, same with donating money, right? So
Yeah.
giving funds. There's some great organizations, and we can certainly link those like Charity Navigator. So if you're looking at different charities and you really want to focus on something specific, like children or children in education, you can do searches on different charities and find out how much of their funds are going towards administrative expenses and how much are actually getting divvied out to the end cause. So there are some great tools to actually start vetting different charities. So that's another good place to start if you're just starting to look. And obviously, if you want to work with a financial advisor who make sure that this is, well integrated into your plan, not only from a value standpoint, but as we talked about earlier, there are definitely ways to structure things to get more tax benefits. So it's not the reason to make the donation, but if you're donating, you might as well get as much bang for your buck as you can. So working with a team that's well-versed in all these different charitable strategies and can really implement those into your plan would be ideal.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, you said it, perfectly. I don't think there's anything I can add to that. So, but I think this conversation, it's just one more example that it's not all about the numbers, but it's the life that they make possible.